If you're passionate about learning languages but have very limited time to learn languages due to other responsibilities and priorities such as school, full-time job, family and friends, etc., well, you've come to the right place. I think time is one of the biggest challenges for all language learners. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my primary steps that I use to schedule my language learning with a full-time job, not only to maintain my current language skills, but also to continue to make progress. I am also going to share some tips to supercharge my consistency on language learning. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jun, and in this YouTube channel, I make videos about study abroad, language learning, and lifelong learning. Making time for language learning is something that I spend a lot of time and energy figuring out as I have been learning languages for a while. I am going to break this video down into 4 steps and 1 bonus section. Firstly, we're going to talk about identifying and understanding what type of learner you are. Secondly, planning and structuring your language learning schedule throughout the week. And thirdly, executing the plan. Fourthly, giving yourself constructive feedback and refining your schedule. Finally, in the bonus section, I'll make some comments about consistency, self-discipline, as well as motivation on language learning. Number 1, identifying and understanding what type of learner you are. So the very first question we could ask to kickstart this video is that in what way do you think you'll learn the language most efficiently? Ideally, while having some fun. Do you think you'll learn the language best with a language tutor or language teacher? Or do you think you'll learn better by watching a series or movie in your target language? Or it could be a podcast or an audiobook in your target language. Or are you the type of person who likes to get out there and talk to people, including native speakers? And the next question is concerning your energy level. Do you focus better in the morning or at night? I.e., are you a morning person or are you a night person? As for me, I am 100% a morning person. These days, my day starts at 5:30 in the morning, and I try to block some time for language learning in the morning. Another good question you could ask yourself is, can you multitask? I.e., can you squeeze some language learning while doing something else? For example, if you're commuting to work by bus and it takes like 40 minutes from your home to work or something, do you think you can listen to a podcast? Or if you're doing some house chores after work, you could try to listen to a podcast or a song in your target language. Or just turn on something like a YouTube video in your background so that you have some exposure. And another thing I want to talk about in this chapter is probably the most important thing in this chapter, which is identify your learning goal and think about why you want to learn the language. Is it to pass the test for college application or job application? Or do you need some level of fluency because you want to work abroad or study abroad? Or you might be interested in certain cultures and you like to delve more into the culture by learning the language. Identifying your learning goals will help you identify your priorities in your language learning. Would you like to focus more on speaking and listening, or reading and writing, or perhaps vocabulary and grammar? Because the intensity for working on each session is going to be dependent on your learning goals. And next, plan and structure your language learning schedule throughout the week ahead of time. So this is the other reason why identifying your learning goal is important, because we're going to plan and structure your language learning schedule based on your learning goals. Before jumping into planning and structuring our language learning schedule, let's briefly talk about why we even bother to do this in the first place. It is mainly because setting default things to do for your language learning is going to massively reduce the mental friction to start studying when you come back home from hard day at work. So in this second step of this video, we're going to set some realistic schedule to block some time to learn languages while you have a full-time job. You will probably want to set this weekly schedule ahead of time, perhaps Sunday before your Monday starts. The first question you could ask here is that how much time you can spend on language learning per week while having a full-time job. It really depends on your learning goal and your schedule, but as for me, I try to give myself 5 to 10 hours per week to learn languages. But 5 hours per week is my bare minimum to learn languages. I try my best not to go under 5 hours. Also here, I will try my best to give each learning session a good balance of working on different language skills, such as speaking, writing, listening, and reading. This also depends on your learning goals, but in general, I think it's good to go for holistic improvement. Also, what I would do in this step is to diversify my tools to learn languages. I know that learning grammar and vocabulary is important too, but watching movies, series, documentaries, and listening to an audiobook or listening to a podcast can be a good way to learn languages. And my tip here is that setting a daily task is also a good idea. As for me, I got 3 daily tasks. Firstly, I read aloud to work on my speaking skill every day for 10 minutes. And the second daily task that I give myself is to revise my vocabs on Anki. Anki is one of the flashcard apps that I like to use. So if you're interested, I highly recommend it. And the third daily task is more fun. Watch a series at least for 20 minutes in my target language before going to bed. And next thing is language tutoring or language exchange. If possible, I would squeeze language tutoring or language exchange in your language learning routine. Probably at least 30 minutes a week. So if you have been watching my video for a while, you probably noticed that I like to encourage you guys to put yourself out there to learn the languages, i.e. talking to a native speaker or talking to other people who are interested in your target language. Because we learn a lot by making mistakes or putting yourself out there. If possible, please try to find a way to multitask to maximize your language learning process. For example, listening to a podcast while doing some chores or during your commute. Back when I was working on my German in college, I would listen to DW News or Easy German during my commute. Both of them are great resources to learn German, so I highly recommend them if you're interested in learning German. And the final thing I want to talk about in this planning stage is to identify and gather your resources. I want you to gather your notebooks and pick your movies, series, documentaries, and podcasts or audiobooks. For example, if you picked a movie for your Wednesday night on this week, you could save the movie on your playlist or your saved section, whatever, to reduce the friction finding the right movie to watch on your Wednesday night or something. And download all the apps and make sure to sign up so that you're ready to use. And I think you're ready to execute your plan. In this video, I want to touch on this execution stage very briefly because I want to put greater emphasis on planning and giving yourself a feedback, which is coming later. Try your best to stick to the plan and make sure to complete your daily task. My tip here would be to document your process as you go along. Just give yourself 5 to 10 minutes before you go to bed. You could just simply ask yourself such questions as, have I completed the daily tasks that I assigned myself? If not, what were the reasons? I think this is a great way to learn more about yourself as a language learner, as well as your schedule. So that is it for the execution step, and we're now moving to the feedback step. You could try to give yourself some feedback and refine your schedule at the end of each week, probably Sunday. This is a very important step because this is a great way to optimize your efficiency by giving yourself constructive feedback. When we are busy, i.e. having a full-time job, we gotta remember that efficiency is key. At the very beginning of this journey, I found myself quite hard to stick to the schedule that I set for myself. So I tried to find out what the problems were while executing the plan. Someday, I would simply feel way too exhausted from my laboratory work. So I could not really gather my energy to sit down and read a book in a target language. In these occasions, I decided to execute what I like to call meaningful downtime for language learning, which means instead of working with books to learn languages when I'm tired, I would just turn on Netflix and watch a series in my target language. And this happens to be one of my daily tasks that I assigned for language learning during the week. Or what you could also do is to prepare for next learning session if you're too tired. You could just bust out your vocab list and shove the vocabs into your Anki flashcard for your next day, if that's your way to study your vocabs. The good thing about this is that it doesn't require any brain power, just a little bit of your time. And in other days, I will find some of my language learning activities a little bit boring. In this case, I would try to gamify the process as much as possible, for example, by using the app or something. And one more thing to think about is how efficient you were throughout the week in terms of learning languages. For efficiency, what we need the most is probably the undivided attention in the given time. I definitely struggled with efficiency after a hard day in my lab, and sometimes other responsibilities and priorities would just float around in my head. So this is why I'm using this tool to give myself undivided attention, a timer. This might be the closest to what we call a magic bullet to consistency if we use it wisely. As I said, I read aloud about 10 minutes a day to improve my speaking skills. But at first, I got distracted. So that's when I started using this timer and show myself a 10 minutes of countdown. And I would tell myself, it is just 10 minutes for my speaking skill. I'll just work on my speaking skill with my undivided attention for 10 minutes and forget about reading aloud for the rest of my day. And I think this has been a pretty good way to trick my brain to be more consistent. And that was pretty much it on the planning front. Here are some comments on consistency and self-discipline, as well as motivation. In my previous video, I talked about two important principles of learning languages. Firstly, language learning is a lifelong process. And secondly, language learning is not a linear process. On these two fronts, I wanted to touch on the power of consistency and self-discipline to learn languages. So consistency is basically your superpower. We just have to make efforts on language learning for a long period of time to make progress. In this video, I put great emphasis on planning and giving yourself feedback. That is mainly because they make the execution process much easier if you plan well and give yourself constructive feedback. And this whole process is going to encourage you to be more consistent, because after each cycle, you're going to feel a sense of accomplishment in terms of language learning. Regarding motivation, I came across this article the other day. Screw motivation. What you need is discipline. We wouldn't want to wait for motivation to hit us to study languages. If you're exhausted from your 9-to-5 jobs or your nights are filled with your social activities, there won't be any space for motivation. Instead, we need discipline for learning languages. Using self-discipline, we're going to find a way to squeeze the language learning in our busy lives, i.e. with full-time jobs. So there you have it. These are my tactics to balance my language learning with my full-time job or school. So if you have any other tactics to make time for learning languages while we're busy, please leave them down in the comment section below to help each other out. So I hope these tips are somewhat helpful. If they were, please hit the like button to support this channel and consider subscribing. I'll be making more videos like this and even evidence-based learning tips in the future videos because I'm into that kind of stuff. If you enjoyed this video, you might like to check out this video over here, where I talk about how to become fluent in a foreign language. Also, I share my story on how I try to put myself out there to learn the English language. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the other side. Bye bye.